Builders, backstories, breakthroughs. This is the Journey in Conversation.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 2 for the Journey in Conversation. We have a fantastic guest with us today, John Kennelly of I Hate Sales. John, how are you doing, man?
Doing great, Paul. How are you?
Not too shabby. It's a beautiful day to record a YouTube show, ain't it?
Nice. Yeah, you got it.
Well, John, let's start by talking about you a little bit. Can you give everybody at home kind of your origin story, the shorthand of where you've been, what you've done? Introduce us to you, John Kennelly.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to do it. And yeah, thanks again, Paul, for having me. Excited for the chat today. Where to begin? I guess we'll keep it pretty professional here. But been really in mostly the tech space for the majority of my career. Started my career in Silicon Valley, lived in San Francisco for 10 years, had a brief stint out of college doing consulting for Accenture, where I more or less took meetings and made spreadsheets for 2 years while flying around the country and probably being billed at an outrageous rate to clients in exchange for things a high schooler could have done. So, don't have the best memories of my consulting days, but at least learned how to be a professional there. And then kind of took those learnings and dove headlong into the startup world, where I spent a lot of time being part of, various startups, going through all the peaks and valleys associated with that. Was part of a startup that got acquired by Google, another one that got acquired by Apple, also built a business I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that grew to about $20 million in ARR that we subsequently had to shut down for a variety of reasons. So feel like I've had the opportunity to see all the ups, downs, and sideways things that happen when you're building a business. Essentially I'm leveraging a lot of that experience in the business that I have today, where I really support founders who are new to sales on how to build that founder-led sales motion and how to promote their business. As I've learned, someone who's been in sales my whole career, I kind of thought, everybody knew how to do it. But the reality is there's a lot of brilliant people out there bringing cool things to market, who just don't have that skill set and who need some kind of foundational help with that. And so that's what, my career has become all about. And it's what I love to do. I think sales gets a bad rap, as the name of my company would suggest. And so I love being able to help founders kind of see the light and just understand that, like, hey, as much as we might see a lot of, garbage out there from a sales perspective, when you do sales right, it's really a beautiful thing. And not exactly where I would have expected my career to go, but it's a lot of fun for me, and it's a topic that seems as relevant now as ever. Maybe I'm slightly biased in thinking that, but I don't know how that accidentally turned into a shameless plug for my business. But here we are. That's the short story on me. Happy to go into more detail on whatever you want to hear.
Yeah, we were chatting on LinkedIn last week about hating sales and the different things that kind of come up, and you posted a poll on LinkedIn asking people, do you hate sales and why? Like, what were some of the highlights that came out of that? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, shout out to you. It was your idea for me to do a poll, and so appreciate the thought there. Unequivocally, the winner is cold outreach and lead gen, right? Like, people are not comfortable starting conversations from scratch, right? Everyone, now this is not actually true, but everybody claims, well, once I get a good lead in front of me, I know how to take it from there, right? The truth is that's not actually the case for most people, but they believe it is. They believe that the only thing they're struggling with is the top of the funnel and getting new people introduced to what they're doing and interested. No question, that is the winner. Cold outreach, lead gen. People hate it. People don't like to do it. People try to avoid doing it. And in reality, in my opinion, it's unavoidable. You have to do it, right? It's not like, flip a switch, make some content and create a cool landing page and everyone's just going to find their way to your product. You gotta do lead gen, you gotta do cold outreach, and everybody hates it.
For sure. So let's kind of bring this back to you. You talked a little bit about your past, started in consulting. You were working with in businesses, startups that eventually got acquired, one that kind of went away, and now you're doing your own thing. And that has been what, six months, a year, give or take, that you've been working on I Hate Sales?
Yeah, so the business has been going for 2 years, but it's only been in its current form for about 6 months. I changed the name of the company in January. We're talking here at the end of July, so yeah, about 6 months that it's been truly like in its current form. I've been on my own for about 2 years, but the business in its current state is still pretty new.
So thinking about when you first started 2 years ago, what was that like? Was it messy? Was it overwhelming? Kind of what was going on with you when you first said like, let's take the leap and start doing our own thing?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely it was all of the things that are not fun, including the circumstances that led to me doing it. Essentially, I briefly attempted like a legal tech SaaS product with a technical co-founder, who my technical co-founder, who was the CEO of the company, had raised a little bit of pre-seed capital. Basically, like was in a position where he had the technical know-how and didn't have any of the business know-how, needed a business co-founder. This was somebody who I knew kind of socially, but had never worked with before. Reached out, asked me to be involved with the company, said he had like a year's worth of runway to pay us like nominal salaries and build the business out. I jumped in. 4 months later, essentially kind of said, I don't want to do this anymore. He more or less bailed. I'm skipping over some of the finer points, but left me unexpectedly unemployed, basically. And, that company shut down, gave back most of the funding to investors. And so 2 years ago, around this time, I kind of was left wondering what the heck am I going to do next, right? And really, it came down to the only thing. Even 2 years ago, people talk a lot about the job market right now and how crazy and difficult it is. 2 years ago is the same story, and I kind of decided the only thing I can do that will allow me to just keep working is just to start a business, file an LLC, and like try to get something going on my own, right? That's the only way I can keep, like, without any break, just keep doing the work that I love and like not have any rest period, right? I just like wanted to keep going, and the only way to guarantee I could do that is to do something on my own. So basically filed an LLC, built a website, and just like tried to start having conversations, and basically made every mistake in the book. Like I was like completely lost and just like did not do a good job of creating early momentum. And it took probably 6 months to get the first client for that business. And after the first client, it took 3 more months to get the second client. And, to be quite honest, when you're someone who claims to be an expert in sales and you can't sell, it's not a good feeling, right? People talk about imposter syndrome and stuff like that, right? Definitely dealt with sort of like, do I even know how to do the thing I claim to be selling my expertise at? Like, am I a total fraud, right? Like the beginning was not fun. And, I think it took a while to get on track, but, feel like things are in a very good spot now, but it wasn't without the very, very messy beginning.
Yeah, and so many. I think I think that story about imposter syndrome is really familiar to pretty much everybody who started a business. Like certainly it's something that's kind of kicked me in the butt once or twice, or more than that, since starting my own business. So I think that like that's something we can all kind of orient around and really understand. If you could kind of take 2 years ago John Kennelly, sorry. You could take 2 years ago John Kennelly and stick him in a chair right beside you right now in this conversation. What would you turn to the left and say to that person? What advice would you give them?
I would say I won't actually turn to the left, but I would say don't avoid talking about what you know how to do, which is sales, right? At the beginning of my business, I had a tagline that was, "Oh, I help founders tell their story." That was what I was out there selling or claiming to know how to do. When really it was sales. Like the business changed when I like talked about sales. I said, I named the company, put sales in the name of the company, and just started hammering that pain point. I danced around it for too long. I claimed well, people don't really like talking about sales. I don't want to be associated with sales. So I'm going to dance around it. I'm going to use other words. I'm going to pull out a thesaurus, or I'm going to ask ChatGPT what words can I use that aren't sales that are actually sales. Don't dance around it. Be clear about the problem that you solve and who you solve it for, and focus on that. Right. And that's like, it's a huge mistake that I made at the beginning of my business. And, I'm a huge believer that like we learn way more from the mistakes than we do from the successes in life. So I'm grateful for that time, and I'm glad I still get to be out here doing what I'm doing. But yeah, I made a huge mistake in not being incredibly clear about what it is that I know how to do and who it is that I can help. And I think that's like a huge opportunity for founders starting their first business, is to avoid getting caught up in trying to look like an expert in something they're not an expert in, and trying to position themselves as something more than they are, and just be really clear about what you solve and who you solve it for. And use common sense words, right? Don't try to get fancy with it. Don't try to just say what it is that you're doing. I made a huge mistake early on with that, and thankfully lived to tell the tale. But a lot of people don't figure it out in time. They make that mistake, and then they end up kind of giving up.
Yeah, don't use a $50 word when a $5 word will do. This saying, adjusted for inflation, pretty powerful stuff, right? Like, a lot of people overcomplicate what they're doing in marketing too, marketing and positioning. Like, it's something that just kind of happens. When thinking back over your journey the last 2 years, there were ups and downs, obviously, as there are with every business owner, everyone who starts a business. When you were in really kind of tricky, demotivating spots, what did you do to keep yourself motivated? Did you have like a routine? Did you have a mantra? Like, how did you kind of push yourself over the pothole?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. And I think one of the things that a lot of people maybe don't think about when it comes to starting your own business and starting a business completely by yourself, right, is like, it is hard to summon the motivation, right? You can spiral pretty quickly, and you can kind of end up sitting around looking up, it's 5 o'clock, you burn an entire day and you didn't do anything with no one else around to lean on. It can be really challenging to summon that. I think for me, what has always worked is try to help someone, try to offer like pro bono services, try to have a conversation where you feel like you delivered value for someone, even if you're not charging for it. For me, that always kind of reinvigorates my passion when I can help somebody, see them get some sort of like tangible result, or like learn something that they can take back to their business. That reminds me like why I'm doing my business, right? Like, so try to, like, if you're in a rut, like try to help somebody out, right? Try to like do something that helps someone who is a potential customer or not a potential customer, but it's a good reminder. Oh, hey, you do know what you're talking about somewhat, right? Even if you can't charge for it in that moment, delivering value for someone, watching their eyes light up and seeing like, okay, I just helped this person. I'm capable of doing this. It's like a really good reminder. And for me, that's like kind of how I fuel the fire, right? Is like help someone, see them get that value. And then it's a great reminder of like, okay, you're not a total fraud. You know what you're doing. Go out there and keep doing it.
Yeah, and it's kind of about that thing where it's like, keep your skills sharp, right? Like, keep the knife sharpened or whatever. And I find with a lot of knowledge-based stuff that I'm into, and I'm sure you kind of find the same. Like, if you go through this period where you're not using a particular skill, or you're not using a particular kind of frame of reference, it gets a little bit sticky when you come back to it and you try to pick it up again. It's like, it's a little bit harder to. So that's good advice. Just kind of like keep on doing the stuff that you do, even if you're not getting paid for it, because that'll keep you sharp.
100%.
Let's talk about change. Change is I find kind of paired at the hip with motivation, right? And there's a ton of change happening right now in labor markets. You kind of mentioned 2 years ago the job market was weird. Today the job market is weird. I feel like there's a lot of people who are kind of like us and they're starting businesses because they want a bit of a backstop in case everything else goes a little bit sideways. There's that concept of like the side hustle or the portfolio career, all of that. If you could give the folks at home some advice on how to be resilient and adapt to change, what would it be?
Very good question. That's a thinker. How to be resilient and adapt to change. I think it's almost like taking inventory of any conversations you had, any projects you've worked on, any things you've done in your career, whether that's for your own business or jobs you had, and try to find what's the common thread of like the things I've done that have really worked, that people were really happy with. What sets all of those apart? Is there a thing that I am uniquely suited to do that it seems clear makes the biggest impact, right? Is it like, do you have a skill set? Do you have a way to build rapport with people that, coworkers love being around you? What is it? Like, try to find the thing that you seem to be better at than everybody else. It can run the gamut of various, it could be like soft skills, it could be hard skills, right? Like, figure it out and then kind of write it down and go, okay, like, could I sell this? Could I sell this as a service? Could I build it into a tech product? Could I build this into a course that I could teach people? But first, it's like figuring out what is the thing, right? Like, that is like step one. Then it's figuring out, is this something that can be monetized? And like, could I find a customer who's interested in this? But I think it's first trying to, like, it's something I did personally that I think is a really worthwhile exercise. It's like, I don't want to call it soul searching. Maybe that's a little dramatic, but it's like taking inventory of like, what am I good at? Right? Because the answer for everyone, if you had a even like mediocre career, you're good at something. You got people to pay you for a really long time, right? So take stock, right? Figure it out. And I think that is like a great place to start. And then you figure out, okay, like, how do I build a moat around that? How do I make that something that no one can ever take away from me, right? And a lot of people go with starting their own thing as a way of doing that. I think all of everything I just said could also be applied to finding your next job, right? Like, I literally was just talking to someone this morning who's looking for a job, and my advice was to approach it like a salesperson, like a founder, right? Like, you have to have this mentality of, I'm going to leave no stone unturned. I'm going to take a non-traditional path to finding a job, the same way you have to do if you're building your own business. A lot of the stuff that's applicable to founders is applicable to job seekers, right? But it starts with, what is my thing? What am I good at? What am I better at than most people? And then finding a home for that.
Yeah, it's you have to know what the thing is before you can keep your eyes open to opportunities for it, right? And it's funny you mention unconventional ways of finding jobs. Like, when I first moved to Toronto, over 10 years ago now, and I was looking for a job. I mailed letters because who does that, right? Like, yeah. I just researched, people who had companies, people who were doing interesting things. I mailed them a letter,
and it worked. If memory serves, right? That worked.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It worked great back then. I don't know if it worked the same today because like, there are fewer people in the office and what have you. But like, do what other people aren't doing. I've always been a big believer in that idea. But enough about me prattling on. Let's talk about failure. You mentioned failure is one of the best opportunities to learn things, and can't agree more. What about failure in your path? What did you, kind of throw it out there, give the old college try, and it just flopped? Is there something that comes to mind that you can share with folks so that they can suck some wisdom out of it?
How many failures can I pick? Which, where do I start? I mean, I think the earliest one that comes to mind for me is I worked for a startup that got acquired by Google. That was obviously like a massive success. I got a job at Google. Oh my gosh, like now I'm going to work at Google forever. This is the best thing ever. Come to like quickly realize that particular like acquisition, even as like a 25-year-old sales rep, I could pretty much see the writing on the wall that like our product didn't really integrate very well into Google. We were selling social media marketing software. The landscape was changing. Our product was becoming less and less relevant. It was getting harder and harder to hit quota. And I became like very, very concerned that Google was just going to fire everyone and shut the product down. Right. Now, the reality is that's not exactly how big tech companies do it. They don't just like, nuke 200 people without any plan. What they do is they give kind of, packages to people who leave, and then they give job opportunities internally to people that want to stay, more or less. But I wasn't thinking that through. I just thought one day they were going to come in and everyone was going to be fired and we were all going to be out on the street. So I went out and got a job at another social media marketing startup. And they were a New York based company. They gave me an offer to be like head of West Coast sales, first ever employee outside of New York. You're going to build out the West Coast presence. They made this like grand pitch to me. And this was 2013 when remote work was nothing like what it is today. And I had a desk phone on a desk in my apartment, and like was like, we weren't really getting on Google Meets. I like could not have been more disconnected from this team. And I lasted 10 months in that role. It was a complete disaster. Like it was just like abject failure. By the way, I was correct in a sense. Google did sunset the product that I was selling, but all of my friends either got lovely like buyout packages to like, give them time to find the next thing, or they got good jobs within Google. Some of my friends 12 years later still work for Google and have made a hell of a lot more money than I have in the last 12 years because they just like were patient and waited it out. So there's like multiple failures packaged within that story. I think the first one is, I think patience is something that is like, I should have probably waited and like let the dust clear a little bit there before like impulsively jumping for another job. I had like fears, and the way I responded to those fears was just jumping and leaving before anything happened. In hindsight, like if I would have waited, I would have had two really good options, which was like money or a job. And then taking a job offer that seemed too good to be true, right? Like when something seems too good to be true, it usually is, right? In hindsight, I was just your everyday run of the mill account executive. There was nothing that particularly special about me in that moment, but this other company made me feel like I was about to be on this amazing trajectory to build out this huge West Coast office, and everything was going to be amazing and perfect. And it was just too good to be true. What was laid out, and it wasn't even the fault of this company. It was more like in 2013, what they were suggesting was just not really possible. It wasn't really, I was set up to fail. And again, it wasn't really anybody's fault. But I latched on to a lot of like really kind of shiny objects and big promises. And in hindsight, like if something seems too good to be true, it usually is, right? So that to me is like the singular failure on my like career trajectory. It always stands out as something that if I could do something over again, it would be that kind of moment in time.
It's interesting. And that kind of brings another question up to my mind. Like it seems in that kind of situation where, in retrospect, you kind of figured out, oh geez, the culture of the technology, the way we work wasn't really kind of like lined up for me to be successful. Did that teach you anything about kind of figuring out when it's time to pull the ripcord? When it's time to kind of accelerate failure and kind of lean into it so that you can get back on your feet quicker. Like, have you learned anything about that from that experience?
Yeah, it's an interesting term, accelerate failure. But I think what comes to mind for me is, I think, and I'm going to frame it around kind of the current work that I do, but I think there's a desire out there for like new founders, new business owners to like spend all of this time sort of in the lab, perfecting your product, perfecting your offering, right? Building with no real evidence that people want what you're building. But well, maybe if I make this thing just perfect and irresistible when it is time to go out and sell and tell people about it, everyone will just flock to it. I'm just going to make money hand over fist. I'm just going to build, 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 build. And then one day flip the switch and just be an overnight sensation. I don't think that ever works, right? I understand why people do it. I think you want to fail fast. Get an MVP, get a rudimentary website, get out there and start talking to people and asking them, if it resonates, asking them if you can work with them, and like try to fail fast, right? Like the worst thing you can do as a founder is just waste time behind the scenes, not talking to your potential customers. And then by the time you actually do get out there, you realize you've built an offering that nobody wants, right? So like try to validate your ideas as fast as possible with real world conversations, right? Understand, do people really have this problem you think they have? And if they do have it, are they willing to spend money to solve the problem, right? Like you want to invalidate your ideas as quickly as possible, or validate them, right? But the worst outcome, for a founder is a year in to figure out that nobody wants the thing they've been, bleeding for the last year. You want to find that out in like a week if you can, so you can pivot and start doing something else, right? So I think the takeaway there being like, I really latched on this idea that you shared of like accelerating failure. Like you want, in sales, we talk about like a slow no is the worst thing that can happen in sales, right? Like the second best outcome in sales is a fast no, right? The first is obviously a yes, but you want to get your ideas invalidated or validated as fast as possible, as to not waste any time. Because when you're building a business from scratch, you don't have time to waste. You have to get money in the door quickly. And so accelerating failure is actually a good thing, as weird as that sounds.
Yeah, beating up your ideas is pretty important, and I find that a lot of people, they're really hesitant to be critical about their own ideas, especially when it's like kind of the core of a product, right? Like you as a founder, you tend to, build this thing, you believe in it, you take it to market, and you encounter resistance. And some people are like, okay, we need to figure out how this could work instead of saying, does this actually work? Instead of being critical about your own thinking. Like that's a skill that sometimes people kind of miss out on. Do you, has having experienced kind of failure, deeply and personally at various points over, your journey, has failure taught you anything really kind of deep and insightful about success, about the nature of success?
I mean, I think the two are a lot closer together than maybe people realize, right? Failure and success, like you can do a lot of the same things and still end up failing, like, and there's a few very small tweaks that can lead to success. Like, so I think maybe this isn't helpful for folks, but the two are very close. Failure and success, it's a fine line. And I think that if there's one thing that comes to mind, it's that, and you kind of just touched on something related to this, which is like, you can't be fearful of hearing negative things about what you're doing, because that is ultimately just a guaranteed path to failure. The people that are successful are the ones that are like, yeah, give me all the feedback. Like, if you hate this, I want to know right now, right? Like, it is like a very common, thing that people want to protect their ego. So they want to go out and solicit kind of echo chamber feedback. Like, they end up indirectly just like forcing people to give them completely hollow, good feedback at the beginning of a business. Like, hey, I just launched my new website. I'm really excited about it. I'd love your feedback. No one is going to tell you anything negative if that is how you frame asking for feedback, right? Hey, I just built this new thing. I'm really excited about it. I'd love your feedback. No one's going to shit all over your idea if that is how you frame it, right? Pardon my language. Feel free to edit that out if we're not on a cursing vibe here. But like, you need to be comfortable having your like hopes and dreams dashed, because if you're not, you're never going to get real feedback, and you're never going to create something that people actually want. If you kind of just walk around going, hey, like, don't you love this thing I built? Isn't it great? That is like a very, 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 very common mistake. And one of my favorite books ever, The Mom Test, is the perfect example of how people make this mistake. They ask for feedback in a way that kind of forces people to give them positive and completely irrelevant feedback. And you got to be comfortable letting people tell you why you're an idiot, and then fixing all the things that they didn't like, right? And it's not easy, right? I say this as someone who's made that mistake countless times, but you have to be comfortable having someone tell you your baby's ugly to really like make a lot of progress and be successful, because the effort level can be the same for someone who fails and succeeds. But if you fail because you spent all this time trying to get people to validate an idea that isn't good, usually that's an ego problem.
Yeah, very much so. You talked about a book that you love. If there was one book that you could recommend to the folks at home who are interested in kind of following in your footsteps, starting their own business, what would it be? What do you recommend people read?
It's The Mom Test. Yeah, it is. I think it so perfectly articulates all of the ways to avoid mistakes that I've personally made in the past and that are most common for founders to make. It's a really short, kind of digestible read, but it does a beautiful job of just articulating how to go out and understand, are you solving a big enough problem that is going to validate the need for your business? And what are the ways that you can really hone in on who you're solving this problem for and how deeply they're feeling this problem, right? I think at the end of the day, whether you're building a product or a service-based business, you have to be super, super clear about the problem you solve and who you solve it for. And I think people really miss the boat on that, especially kind of in this like AI automation era we live in, where you can build an app in 30 seconds, right? But if it's useless, even 30 seconds is a waste of time, right? You need to go out and have real conversations with real people to understand what's keeping them up at night, and then build based on that. The Mom Test does a phenomenal job of laying all that out and kind of making it clearer for people how to validate their idea. And the way to do it is to not talk about your idea at all. It's to shift the focus outwardly on your customers or your prospective customers, right? What's keeping them up at night, right? And then bring that information back and juxtapose it with what you're building and see if there's alignment there. So yeah, could not more highly recommend the Mom Test.
Cool. All right, folks. I'm going to put the link to that book in the show notes so you can go check it out, as John says. Let's talk about mentorship. So you've I'm sure had a bunch of influential people in your life over kind of the course of your journey who have kind of helped you on your path. Is there any particular advice from one of those folks that sticks out that you think is highly worth like giving to our audience at home and kind of gift them with the same epiphany that you had, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing stands above all the rest for me, in kind of speaking with someone in my network who has a little more experience as a founder than I do. Basically, kind of expressing concerns about starting a business by myself and what am I going to do if it fails, and feeling very like heavy and dramatic when thinking about all that stuff. This person said, worst thing that happens if you fail is you have to go get a job. And that immediately just kind of took all of the weight out of everything, right? Okay, you start a business, like, unless you're like Elizabeth Holmes or people like that who actually do end up going to jail after they started a business, right? By and large, you start a business and it fails. All that happens is you just have to go get a job, right? And so I think we can all feel we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves that what we're doing is the end all be all, and it's really dramatic and really important. And if I don't do this correctly, everyone's going to make fun of me and I'm going to be a total laughing stock. And the reality is that's not how it works. If your businesses fail all the time, obviously we hope ours do not fail. But if they fail, then you just kind of suck it up and you go get a job. That to me was an incredible framing of what it's like to start a business, and how something that we feel like is incredibly high stakes is actually just, hey, go get a job if it doesn't work out. I don't mean to diminish how hard it is to start a business and how dramatic it is if we have to shut it down. But for me, it just took a lot of the drama out of building a business. And I think it's something a lot of people, could use, a little bit of that infused in their day to day. Take some of the pressure off yourself.
Yeah, for me, your story kind of jogged this in my memory. But when I was thinking about starting this business that I'm kind of running now, I was sitting on a patio in small town Ontario up by, kind of the Muskoka area, lakes, cottages, canoeing, lots of really nice houses with lots of money flowing around, like that kind of place. And we were just chatting. And I said, I think I'm going to work for myself for a while, John. And my brother's name is John too. So, I said to him, like, I think I'm going to work for myself for a while. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, that's great. I've been working for myself my entire life. Like, I'm not really wired to work for other people. So maybe it runs in the family. And he said to me at that point, I want you to remember this. A guy that I worked with at Osler & Osler law firm in Toronto, back in the 70s, a guy that I worked with at Osler said to me, when you work for yourself, keep in mind that nobody will ever pay you more than you will pay yourself. So you're taking a bet on yourself, right? And you don't have to worry about salary. You can earn what you make. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's a good point. So it kind of just like lodged in my brain that when we work for ourselves, like it's a bit of an open road ahead, and you don't have some of the same limitations that you would otherwise have, and in other ways you have different kinds of limitations. It's kind of interesting talking to people who have been down this road before, and then that's why you and I are talking, because I'm deeply interested in your story, and I'm sure the folks at home are as well. But anyway, little aside on that one.
I love that, and I'm gonna pour a slight bit of cold water on it, but I think in a sort of in a positive way.
Yeah.
The reason not everybody does this is because you're absolutely right. The ceiling is unlimited in terms of what you make, but so is the floor, right? Like, you got to be totally comfortable knowing there's going to be the occasional $0 month, and you have to be like prepared to weather that storm, right? But I think that's what makes the unlimited ceiling so exciting and so worthwhile, right? Is the fact that the floor is also unlimited, right? So there's some, mentally you just have to prepare yourself for the good and the bad.
Yeah, it's very true. Let's talk about sales, and let's talk about the profession that you're in. You want to help folks with sales, do coaching, training, really empower people to not hate sales, like so many people do. What's a bet that you're making on the future of what you do? Your industry, your audience, your business, your profession. Like, what's kind of ahead? What do you see?
If there's a bet I'm making on the future, it's that AI and automation is only going to take us so far, right? I think there's a ton of incredible uses for AI with regards to kind of sales and growing your business. And I think a lot of it, like behind the scenes, is doing a good job at making us better at sending follow-up emails and running kind of marketing funnels. And there's a lot of automation that can be done sort of on the back end. But I think there's starting to be a bit of a backlash. People are so sick of seeing AI generated content all over LinkedIn. They're so sick of getting emails written to them that were completely obviously written by AI. They're sick of dealing with support agents on websites that are obviously not real people, right? So that's all to say, I think there's a huge opportunity for founders looking to grow their business to really show up authentically. People still want to buy from a human, right? They want to understand the business that they're transacting with has a human face of some kind, right? And so I think for like, I'm betting on, there's a ton of AI that is like additive that people should be using, but I'm betting on, at the end of the day, business owners, founders are going to need to be really good at talking about what they do and not, reading AI generated scripts, but just having a deep understanding of the person on the other side of the computer or on the other side of the table, and like bringing the truly like human aspects into sales, right? How do you ask great questions? How do you really understand your prospective customer? How do you get in their head? I think a lot of that is still very human. And so I'm kind of making a bet that while AI is not going anywhere, I will continue to use it in certain ways. I think there's going to be a pendulum that swings the other way, and people are going to demand more human interactions. And the people that get good at those are going to be the founders that build, great businesses.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like using a hammer, right? Like a hammer can help you pound in nails faster, better, stronger, whatever. But if you don't know how to use the hammer, things are going to go a little bit sideways. AI doesn't strike me as too much different from that.
Yeah, I love that. I love the hammer analogy. There's a lot of great anecdotes and analogies about building a business that involve a hammer in some way, shape, or form.
That's true. For someone who's listening at home, they're just getting started out. They want to walk a path similar to yours. What would you want them to take away from your story? If you could sum it up and say, remember this one thing, what would it be?
Get really good at asking questions. If you can become someone who is known for being genuinely interested in what other people are building, what problems they have, you're going to be successful. Because I think discovery is kind of how this translates into sales. But I think in general, if you're just a sponge, if you genuinely want to get to know people, if you genuinely want to understand what they're working on, that's magnetic. People want to be around people like that. And so there's just limitless benefits to being genuinely interested in the people that you're coming in contact with. Number one, if you are genuinely interested in people, they are going to find you fascinating. Number two, if you're genuinely interested in people, you're going to learn a ton, right? You're going to learn what everyone's working on. You're going to learn what's going on out there, and it's going to make you better at whatever you're doing. So I think, if I could go back in time and be better at something, it would be that. It would be just being a sponge, asking tons of questions. And I think it also happens to be a great way to validate any business idea, getting good at asking a lot of questions and understanding the person, on the other end of the table.
And for anybody who's interested in starting a podcast, getting really good at answering questions is a part of being a good guest. Being really good at asking questions is a part of being a good host. So, that's great advice for outside of sales to people.
It's also making this conversation particularly challenging for me, because all I want to do is answer your questions with another question, because that's what I've trained my brain to do. So just sitting here and only answering questions and yapping about myself does not come naturally. But it's fun to be the askee occasionally instead of the asker.
Well, this is a perfect opportunity then for you to stop yapping about yourself and start yapping about what you're doing. Why don't you give us the elevator pitch for I Hate Sales, what it's all about, and remember, you are the sales pro, so I want to be convinced in 17 seconds or less.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so I would say my business has evolved quite a bit, and even though only 6 months that I've been doing quote unquote I Hate Sales, a lot of my time has been spent kind of doing, high ticket retainer based consulting work for businesses that are maybe having trouble getting over that million in revenue hump. They've built a business, but now it's starting to stagnate. They need to go out and sell more. I'll come in and help them with that. In that time, though, I've also come across a lot of really brilliant founders in year one of building their business who have never sold before. They're now a founder for the first time, and they realize, uh-oh, I'm a salesperson now. And historically, I did not have a way to support those folks. They just don't have $5K a month plus to spend on consulting, but they really need help and they need it fast. That's where the cohort was born, basically. So, I run a 4-week, more or less sales 101 for founders cohort program, live sessions with me. Really, the goal being there's a ton of brilliant founders out there who have this gap in their skill set, which happens to be the thing one of the only things I'm good at, which is early stage sales and building that out. So my goal is to help as many brilliant founders as possible plug that hole so they can build the business that they want. Because unfortunately, a lot of founders fail in year one because they never got a sales motion off the ground. So hopefully there can be fewer green open to work banners out there because of me, because I help founders learn how to sell.
Right on. All right, folks, we're going to put the link to all of John's stuff in the show notes so you can get him on LinkedIn, check out his website. John Kennelly, thank you very much for joining us on the Journey in Conversation today. Fantastic conversation. And I'm sure the folks at home are going to get a lot out of what you had to say. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Journey in Conversation. If you liked this episode, follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. More builders, more breakthroughs, coming soon.